everyone, and welcome back to the Grimm Chronicles. I am thinking this is going to be episode 28, and I'll check my weekly reading update. And it's been one of those weeks that seem like what has happened. It seems much further than a week, is what I'm trying to say. It seems like it's been longer in terms of my reading and just where I am in my mind space and vis-a-vis the world, if that makes any sense. Probably not. Anyway, so Jane Austen July, let's start with that. So I finished Pride and Prejudice, that's right. And I'm just remembering I was going to give you, I wanted to finish reading the introduction and tell you about it. And I don't know if I quite finished it. And so one of the things that has happened over the week is I've had these ideas for separate videos that then kind of seem a little bit too daunting. And so reading this introduction by a very interesting critic called Tony Tanner. Tony Tanner was, I think, British, but he had an interest in American literature and he lived over here. He's definitely sort of an academic his whole life. He's very smart. The introduction reads very well and very smart. And I was thinking almost of doing a kind of mini lecture on it all, but I'm not sure, and I'm looking down too much, sorry, because I'm looking at the pages of the introduction. Maybe I should though. I'm still debating it on live on camera while I do my update. Maybe I will. I should finish it. It's not very long, but it's very full and very, very, in a certain sense, philosophical. He places Austen in the context of other novels from earlier and around her own time. So he mentions Richardson, who I already had mentioned, and other people. And then he talks about her connections to, in terms of the novel and what it shows us, he sees connections to David Hume mainly, and also Locke a little bit, John Locke. But the Humean connections are really interesting, and there is a book out there about Jane Austen and David Hume and how their sort of corpuses seem to be talking to each other. It has the word mirror in the title, written by an American academic. And that's sort of so kind of going that route with my thoughts on this. So maybe I will set it aside and make it its own thing. I should just do it. Sorry to be so tentative about everything in my catch-up. So, but that is something I started, at least. I haven't finished it completely, but and it's very interesting for people who, it kind of, for me, distills what is great about Austen. For me, it is interesting that she's basically, in a certain sense, kind of novel. These are novelizations of philosophical ideas and concepts that are in the air at that time. I think that's absolutely fascinating. That's one of my interests. And me as a German studies person, kind of, when I read about Hume, the little bit that I've read, or when I read about what he wrote, I can't help thinking of Immanuel Kant. And I think Hume was very important for him. And I know that the Scottish Enlightenment was, I'm trying to remember if Hume was Scottish. Sorry about that, I don't remember that. But anyway, so that's one thing that has been in my mind. And in general, Jane Austen, I don't think I'm going to watch the Persuasion adaptation. I might give it a go, we'll see. But I really, really enjoyed Spinster's Library's rant about it. And I think she was spot on about a lot of things. They just need smarter people in charge at these places at Netflix. There are people who could do a good job of modernizing. I've seen people say that Bridgerton is sort of better at capturing the essence of Austen and then completely modernizing it and going with that. I wasn't such a fan of Bridgerton, but I could give it another go. I personally didn't care for it that much. Let's see. So that's Jane Austen, and the only connection I gave up on reading either the other novel or the biography because it was just not that interesting to me. I still do have this one that I'm glad I have this, and I will look at it at some point because of the family connections, and but not right now. And so the only thing I'm still kind of reading that is connected to Jane Austen July is my little novel by Theodor Storm, Before the Storm. Not Theodor Storm, Theodor Fontane. There is a writer called Storm, but this is not him. This is Theodor Fontane's lovely, lovely novel, Before the Storm. A deep dive into the atmosphere of this small town up in the eastern area of Prussia. And its characters are very sort of, I mean, some of the stuff, the descriptions of the cozy little places that people live in, and the fact that he brings in the whole town, he talks about the high and the low and the in-between, it borders on cozy. And sometimes in this writing, I do think borders on kitsch. And it's probably one of the reasons why it's not that popular with the young folk. I mean, I found a terrible, well, no, I shouldn't say terrible, but just videos ranting about how awful Fontane is. He's of a different era, and so it doesn't connect for a lot of people, but I think he's very readable and enjoyable in a kind of almost cozy, this is not David Hume type way. So it's going, and I'm reading it slowly. I'm slowly being introduced to the cast of characters, and so one of the cast of characters is, in German, she's called Hoppenmariken, and she's basically, it's a very gothic novel. So that's kind of kind of coming down into lower forms of entertainment literature, as we say in German, or even Trivialliteratur, trivial. And so Hoppenmariken is almost like a witch. And what's interesting about how he introduces us to her, and I actually think it's quite interesting, is how we go into her home and we follow her into her home as if we were a camera watching her, kind of like almost like a documentary, and we see her funny little home, and there is perhaps questionable depictions of disability in the sense that she's a little person, and so she is this kind of overwrought gothic fairy tale-esque figure of this little lady in her funny little house. And there were kind of weird birds in the house. There's sort of she's known as someone who can get things for people and do things. She's made a name for herself as being a sort of a what do you call it when someone brings people packages? A messenger of sorts. Anyway, she's obviously quite poor, but she has enough, and she's also very strange. But we sort of are introduced to her strangeness in a very interesting way. And he does a pretty good job of us sort of, it is kind of dismissive of her in a certain sense, or kind of cliche, stereotypical. But it's also kind of, it's well done enough to have nuance so that you do kind of like her and feel for her, is what I'm trying to get at. It's not completely dismissive and mean. It's not mean. It's actually not. It's not. And then the new person that we're now being introduced to is someone called Schulze Kniehase. And then the first thing we get there is a description of the whole estate, the Hof, so all the different buildings, and it's just beautifully done and very sort of, the whole story seems to be taking place a lot over winter and Christmas, and so it does have this kind of cozy winter vibe. And it's funny that I keep saying cozy with this novel that is about how these German folk are dealing with the Napoleonic wars. So it's about war too, and death and all that good stuff, or good stuff, not good stuff. So it's sort of interesting how his approach to all of this. It's very humanizing in a certain sense. So I completely love it. It's sort of, I would call it's my straightforward book. I wouldn't go so far to say it's my easy book, but it's not hard. It's just a narrative. I don't think he's quite at the level of a Tolstoy, but it's sort of, you get kind of a picture of the whole society, and it's really well done. So that's that. I'm still listening and enjoying Midnight Tides by Stephen Erikson, and I've been having it on my list and not been getting to wanting to sort of review each of the chapters that I read, so I kind of get a better sense of what's actually happening on the wiki. But I'm kind of getting enough of a sense, and it's actually quite well done, quite interesting. I really kind of like how he brings people back from being quote unquote dead. They come back to life because some higher power decides that they need to. And I think that's actually kind of interesting. And this is what's happening here right now with this one person who's been brought to life. But this is a group of creatures whose burial procedures, sorry if you hear Lily, she just popped in, she might make an appearance. So their burial procedures are very strange, and they have this elaborate system of putting coins all over the body of the dead and then wax. So they're kind of like, you can't even recognize them anymore. It's a mummification via coins and wax. And of course, this person has been brought back to life, but he still has wearing the coins, and they're melted into his eyes, and it's all kind of icky. And so he's walking around with these golden coins stuck to his body, and he's come back to kind of be in charge of those people. So really interesting stuff. I like it. It's perfect for when I need to be walking around the house and doing my chores, doing my cleaning and all that good stuff. So that's that. Then something completely different. And so this happened because I was on the Twitter and I saw a picture that I forget his name. He's the YouTuber Traveling Through Literature with the beard. His name is, I want to say, it's not Rick, is it? I'm sorry that I don't remember his name, but the channel name is Traveling Through Literature. And he posted a picture of his haul while he was in New York City. And one of the books, I just kind of decided to Google the author, and I was intrigued, and I picked up one of her books on Kindle because that was the one that was available, and it's amazing. And she's an amazing writer that I had not even heard of. And the name is Rikki Ducornet, Ducornet, Rikki Ducornet. An amazing writer and artist. She's really sort of at the top of her game in dual fields, and has had a really interesting life. She's about 20 years older than I am, so not young. And definitely the work I'm reading of hers is part of a group of works of novels that explore the elements. So water, fire, earth, and what's the other one? Water, fire, earth, and the other elements. And there's another one that might be the fifth element, which is it's called phosphor, but here it says it's representing a fifth element being the light or dream. So the four elements: earth, fire, water, and air. And I'm reading the water one because it was the one that was available for Kindle. Fountains of Neptune. It's called Fountains of Neptune. And I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the year that it was written. It's not her latest work. And it's actually really good. I almost feel like this is the year where I sort of serendipitously, if that's a word, stumble onto these authors that are amazingly good and that I love. Margaret Young. But I could sort of see that Ducornet is not going to be for everyone. She's not focused on plot. It's almost sort of rhythmical prose that sort of lulls you in. There is stuff happening. It's definitely not a poem, but it is lyrical to the point of being a poem in some points. And the narrative is almost, I mean, you do follow the narrative. And so Fountains of Neptune has, for someone who's interested in fairy tales and folk, it has a lot of fairy tale references. And it's connected to the folk representations of water, and but it's done at a very high level, and the writing is actually really good, really excellent writing. I'm just so smitten with her work and her whole corpus. The fact that her artwork is really appealing and interesting too. And she had a sort of interesting childhood. Grew up with her father was a Cuban American who worked at Bard College. She grew up on the campus of Bard College, so has had a really interesting life in that sense. And I think she went to France there and lived there for a while. And so the European influence is there too. So very sort of multicultural background. And wow, I'm amazed. And this is going really well, this reading. And it's as if you can sort of read it quite quickly because it's so sort of rhythmical and you just kind of go with it. But I don't want to rush it either. It's not a very long book, though. It's called The Fountains of Neptune, as I said before. So I'm really enjoying it. And fun fact, Rikki Ducornet is the Rikki from the Steely Dan song. Is it Steely Dan? Yeah, Steely Dan. Rikki Don't Lose That Number by Steely Dan. That it is supposedly about her. And because Donald, I think his name is it Fagen? Donald Fagen from Steely Dan. Sort of was intrigued by her, and they met at a party, and he gave her his number and said, "Rikki, don't lose that number." And even though nothing came of it, I mean, she was already, in a marriage, but she does kind of have a nice way of saying, philosophically, it's an interesting song. I mean, I think his number is a cipher for the self. Don't lose that number. Don't lose yourself. So yeah, that's a fun little trivia part about Rikki Ducornet. Really interesting writer, and I'm going to read more of her stuff, and I'm really glad I found it. And then, yeah, that's about it. The other sort of video that I thought I might do, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to, is, so I've fallen into watching Criminales videos, specifically the ones connected to the read-along that comes after Jane Austen in July, which is, of course, Garbaugust. Garbaugust being We All Read Garbage, which is hilarious. And I entered the drawing, and lo and behold, I have won one of the books that he's going to send me, a garbage book. And so, as I wrote in under his description to enter the giveaway, if I win the garbage, I will read the garbage. So now I'm committed to reading the garbage that I am sent. You'll see it right here. And so what I was saying is I was thinking about doing a video about German garbage, and by that I mean German pulp fiction, which has a really long, interesting, rich history that I'm not really up on. And, there's all kinds of sort of tributaries and branches going off into things like comics and, German comic books, but that's not really what garbage books are. I'll see how it goes. I even downloaded an example of a German garbage book to read during Garbaugust, which maybe I will do too. I mean, if I can, we'll see how far I get with it. And I mean, a while back, I had kind of talked about the opposite of garbage, which is Arno Schmidt, so very high, serious writer. But he was fascinated with someone that's borderline garbage, which is Karl May, the guy who wrote about the Indians and the Native Americans, but for them they were Indiana, and other exotic people. And so, I mean, Karl May's stuff is very, it's schlock, basically. It's very formulaic, if that's a word. There's all different words for bad writing, schlock, hack, whatever. So there is a long tradition of that in German history to this day. Specifically one publisher, so maybe I'll do a little mini talk about German garbage, which is I'm interested in it because I teach fairy tales, and oftentimes just the idea of what types of reading throughout the ages have been looked down upon, and for what reason, and unfairly so. Of course, garbage encompasses everything in terms of formulaic, mass, but also pornographic. The whole shebang. So it is an interesting, for me, it's an interesting thing to think about more than actually to read a lot of them. But that being said, if I win the garbage, I will read the garbage, and I will tell you all about it. So. That's the other thing that's kind of happening, is this foray into other types of stuff that one can read. That's interesting. I think that's where I'll leave you for today. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope I didn't lean in too much. and I will check in with you very soon, either with maybe the Jane Austen one, and I'll think about Garbage. I mean, it's not quite August yet, so we have a little bit of time. And hope you're all doing well. We're still watching, actually we're watching Sopranos still, but we finished with Bosch, which is good. But now we've started an interesting show, which is called, is it called Capitani? It's a crime show that takes place in Luxembourg. And so you get the wonderful Luxembourgish language, which is a fairly Germanic sounding dialect, much more Germanic than French. And so that's what we're watching now on Netflix. That we just started that yesterday, and it's quite good, and it's interesting because it takes place in Luxembourg, which is a place that we don't often hear much about. So that's our new show. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Hope everyone's doing well. Are you excited for Garbaugust? Tell me if you are, and I will see you at some point very soon. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.